Hello everyone, welcome to the Founder Series by TeamWave, and our today's guest is Chinmoy Mishra, who is the founder and CEO of CoLiv. CoLiv intends to provide students with a modern form of co-living, and today we will be discussing with him, listening to his entrepreneur journey. So, shall we get started?
Yeah, sure, Rashmi. Good morning and thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
And my first question would be, we would love to hear from the founder himself, what is CoLiv and how did you come up with this idea?
Sure. So, Rashmi, I've been an entrepreneur maybe for the last 8 years or 9 years or so. Started my first venture way back in 2013 and exited that in 2019. And we have been all four founders with the same founders in the previous organization and my next venture. So we have been in the technology space for long. You could say all our lives we have been in technology and working for large companies and stuff. So when we came out of our previous venture, we were like, let's do something different. It's been too much of technology; it was getting boring. So we explored other spaces, and then we actually started with a very different concept. As part of Hooliv, we were actually looking at setting up elderly care homes. More like a daycare for the senior citizens, you could say. We found that either in India you have these poorly run nursing homes, or you have like high Ambi Valley kind of thing where people buy a bungalow for their parents and for them to stay. So there was nothing in between. So we were kind of contemplating that idea of having like daycare centers for elderlies, but then we parked that for the time being. We said maybe we are slightly ahead for the Indian market. And so the next logical thing was, hey, why don't we look at the student segment? So what we figured, Reshmi, is that when you look at student accommodation or shared student accommodation, we always have been in a very traditional that PGs that we call, right? People have maybe a 10 to 12 rooms that they convert it into a PG and students stay there. So when we were looking at this opportunity, we realized that many of those traditionally run PGs were extremely, unorganized. They lacked infrastructure. There was no privacy. The food was bad. Students always complained about that. And the very reason they kept running is because the supply was never ceasing. Students kept on coming, and then they had no other place, so they kind of started staying in the same shabbily run accommodation. So we thought that maybe there's a great opportunity to be more organized in this space. And also build a facility where children, the kids, they not only enjoy staying, it improves their quality of living as well. So with that thought, Rashmi, we launched Hooliv. That was in 2019, and 4 or 5 months down the line, we had the entire lockdown thing. But very, very, proud of the team. That moment we came out of the lockdown, August or September, when the team could actually move out. Since September till date, we have all onboarded almost 5,000 beds across 4 towns in India, and looking to close this financial year possibly with 6,000 or 6,500 beds. And the focus that we have, Reshmi, with CoLiv is, one is we are exclusively catering to the student demography. So we are, when I say student, could be 18 to 24, 25 age group, and they could be pursuing any vocation, need not necessarily be enrolled in an institute. They could be, enrolled in a coaching institute, or they could be just out of their home pursuing a hobby. That doesn't matter to us, but that should be the age group. Then the next criteria that we have is that we are very heavily focused on the non-metros, or rather the tier 2, tier 3 cities. And there was a conscious choice between the tier 1 and the tier 2s, and we said, let some of the early leaders in this shared accommodation space fight it out in the metros, while we kind of encircle them in the non-metros. And also, when you look at the properties in the non-metros, in some of the smaller towns and cities of our country, there is a great opportunity to actually bring about a difference. When we visit some of those properties, we look at those assets. It's so pitiable a condition. Even if you are putting a Kent RO in a floor, it's an upgrade. That's how bad they are. So it's a great opportunity to make a difference. And so that's the second principle we're following. And the third one, again, Reshmi, is that at Hooliv, we are a very asset light company. So we don't actually acquire properties or build something from grounds up. We take up existing infrastructure from the owners, and then we put in our own capital to do the retrofitting and rent it out to the students. So we improve the hygiene, the privacy, the security, and the meal options, the rentals, and then provide it to the students. And the last and the most significant thing, Reshmi, is that one which all four of us are very passionate about, is that we felt when we are looking at this particular demography and the segment, the kids there, they lack certain things. When they move to a metro or a tier 1, they always end up at the raw end of the stick when it comes to applying for a job, or even rubbing shoulders with students from the metro. So we said, why don't we build more of a community aspect to all our properties? And when I say community, go beyond the usual rhetorics of just providing a common space for people to commune, take it something ahead and say, can we provide them vocational training? Can we provide them spoken English courses, job interview skills, or even, help them improve their employability quotient, so that when they come out of their properties, they're at a much better position. So that's how we're structured right now, Rashmi. 16-member team, as I said, around 5,000 beds across Pune, Meerut, Dehradun, Jaipur, and now we just took up our first property outskirts of Noida. So yeah, big plans ahead, and we are backed by a very good public listed company called Pulte Patil Developers. So they are on our cap table. We raised the funds from them just before the lockdown, so that kind of helped us tide over the lockdown, and also we came out of the lockdown with a slightly better financial cushion than some of our other competitors. So not many could take the lockdown, and while in all public forums I say it's very unfortunate that they're to shut shop. In the heart of hearts, we know that's a good thing for us. So, so that's how we are placed, Rashmi, at Hooliv. I hope that gives you a decent idea of what we
Yeah,
do.
yeah, that actually you give very detailed answer. Few of the questions I had lined up, like I had to ask, you have answered all those questions.
I jumped the, I jumped the questions. I'm sorry about that.
No. So actually, the COVID part I would ask about that later. And so
Sure.
your yeah, after listening to your idea, I am very curious to know because it is very you are doing a lot for the student community. But how did you reach out to the first few customers? How did you tell, or how did you
Mhm.
make them know that okay, this is a great idea? How did you inform them about
Yeah.
it?
Well, that's a great question, actually, Rashmi. And the thing is, when you look at some of these non-metros, right, there the property owners were not aware of this organized way of looking at assets, right, or student housing. They were all running in silos. Whereas if you look at a Delhi or a Mumbai, you still had pockets where there was organized players running student housing, right? So definitely, initially, it was a challenge to convince the owners that what is the benefit for them. End of the day, it comes down to that, right? So I think it needed a lot of persuasion, and we had to show them the whole fact that, hey, look, today you are fighting for driving occupancy in your properties, and then your rental incomes are variable depending on how many beds are occupied. But when we take it over, we are paying you a monthly rental, so you are assured of a return, and at the same time, you don't have to worry about the occupancy. That's something that we are taking care of, right? So you're almost getting money, sitting at your home. So I think that kind of cut the eyes that, hey, look, this is something that might help us in the long run, better yields, and also the fact that, Rashmi, we are investing in upgrading the properties, right? So once we have a 5 or a 7 year lease period with the owner, so by the end of it, unfortunately, if we have to move out, the capex that we have invested and improvement that we have done on the property still belongs to the owner, right? So those, I think, these education thing played a crucial role in the early part. And then what happened, Rashmi, is that once you have few properties in one location, the others get to hear about it, and they're like, oh, okay, this seems to be a good way. So it kind of spreads, right? And then for the once you have like 5 properties, maybe the sixth one isn't that difficult to convince or get the owner to be convinced. So that's how we spread. And in some places, for example, in Jaipur, there we always had a good PG culture because a lot of kids from rest of Rajasthan come there to prepare for the CA and all that. So the owners were aware to a certain extent, and some of the other competitors that we have in this space, they had also been in Jaipur. So that market was relatively easier for us. But places like Meerut and Dehradun, and now we're looking at things like Patna, Bokaro, and all, there certainly we need to educate the market and show them what benefits they have. So it's a gradual process, but once you show them that, it works out well.
So are you using any marketing channels like Instagram, Facebook, etc., where these kids hang out? Are you using any such marketing channels to reach out to these students?
Yeah. So on the student side of things, Rashmi, of course, we there are two things, right? One is, since we are taking up properties which were already running a student accommodation, so a lot of those students had left their luggage in the room and had gone back for the lockdown. So they're all coming back. So for a majority of our properties, we do not have such a big fight for the occupancy, at least for this academic year. And for this other part of it, yes, certainly for some of the newer properties which are converting student housing for the first time, there, in order to drive the occupancy, we are doing a couple of activities. One is reaching out to them over an Instagram and a Facebook, definitely. I think Instagram still remains the preferred mode of reaching out, especially for this age group. We are involved in that, and of course the other usual suspects like the Google AdWords and the ACOs and stuff, and also partnering with a lot of aggregators of student housing, where generally they see a lot of traffic of students coming over and searching for property. So doing the usual route. And also we are partnering with, or not really partnering, but we are leveraging, say, the local panwalas or the chai shops right outside colleges. That's where the kids hang out. So we are kind of incentivizing them that why don't we push students to our properties and stuff. And the last thing we are doing also, wherever our properties are close to educational institutes, Rashmi, we are trying to partner with those institutes so that they can push the overflow crowd to our properties. So these are three, four things we are doing currently to drive the whole demand part of it.
You had worked as an entrepreneur. This is not your first company, right? So how did the past experience shape up journey in Hooliv?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing, learning, Rashmi, once you go through your first journey. There are so many mistakes that we did at various levels. And I think those are the biggest takeaway for us, the learning from all those mistakes. I think, just on a fun side of things, the two biggest mistakes I did in my previous venture was not getting a CA on board right from day one, and also not getting a lawyer. I think, the CA part, especially, is very crucial as entrepreneurs. I think we're so involved and passionately driving our product and our involved in sales that we miss out on this basic hygiene, with regards to the regulatory aspects, the filings, the share certificates, and all that. And you can ask any entrepreneur who have had an exit or a next round of raise, that comes back to haunt you, and that I think we kind of messed up. So in this venture, before even I got started, the first thing I did is I got hold of a good CA firm. It's like, hey, look, you are with me throughout the journey. So anything good, you take the credit. Anything bad, you take the fault for it. So but you have to be with me. I think that I did. And the other thing that we did is we had I have a lawyer friend, so we got him on board as well, and we said every document that passes our company has to be vetted by you. There's nothing that's going out without being vetted. So I think some of these things Rashmi, stand out a lot. I think when you look at hindsight, in my previous venture, we left a lot of money on the table. So this time we are smarter on how do we monetize. Or maybe even, I think one big mistake we did in the previous venture is that since we were so raw, we were just beginning our journey. The reason we left so much money on the table is because we didn't have a good mentor or an advisor to actually help us out there. And maybe we were complacent too. So in this time round, fortunately, the real estate is such a new space for us. We are not aware of everything. So we're almost, you could say, impulsively driven to check with someone that, hey, is this good or is this bad? Right. So that kind of puts some kind of, filtering mechanisms for us. So, yeah, there's been a lot of learning. But one thing I always maintain, Rashmi, is that whether we are building a technology venture or we are building into real estate or even ed tech, food tech, agri tech, whatever it is, I think the fundamentals of taking something from scratch and building, from an idea and building a business out of it, I think the fundamentals remain the same. It's how you deal with your customers, your suppliers, the level of integrity that you have, the professionalism, and most significantly, if we are able to maintain that unit economics or the profitability at each and every project or each and every property that we take up, at some point in time, we'd be profitable at a corporate level as well. And I think you look at any any venture in any space, Rashmi, that unit economics, the focus on that or the profitability remains constant. All right. And in how do you go about building teams? How do you manage your relationship with your colleagues? I think that's kind of space agnostic, right? It could be in any space; it remains the same. So I think some fundamentals remain the same. Then some, based on our learnings, we are trying to not repeat the mistakes, hopefully. So let's see where it ends up.
That's very insightful answer, Chinmoy.
Thank you.
I think it might come with experience, like so much knowledge and how to wake up the company.
Thanks, Rach. We appreciate it.
And is your team based in New Delhi? Is the office based in New Delhi?
We are headquartered in New Delhi. That's three of
Now,
our founders are based in.
how many other
Yeah.
offices do
So
you have?
so we are spread across four cities now. So we could say, Delhi, since three of the four founders are based in Delhi, so it's almost become like an head office kind of thing. But my elder sister, who is also a co-founder, Dr. Rashmi, she is based out of Pune and she handles the entire Pune operations, Pune and nearby. So they have a pretty sizable team up there. In terms of Dehradun and Jaipur, with small teams. So, but majority of things are being driven when it comes to the operation side. She's the chief operating. So when it comes to the operation side, she takes care of it from Pune. When it comes to technology, biz dev and stuff, we take care of it from Delhi.
Okay, okay, okay. And one thing, like you were talking about the pandemic, right? Sometime back. So, how did that affect you? Like, what all changes you had to make?
Okay. I mean, it came at a most unfortunate time, Reshmi, just like for everyone else. I think we had just closed our round of funding in March, And I think by April 1st, we were supposed to go live with our first two properties. So we are really excited and looking forward to it. But then unfortunately, everything had to be pushed. So there are a couple of things which happened, Reshmi, for general, the student housing industry as such, or the co-living industry, if you take into account the working professionals as well. One is that some of the early leaders that were there in the space and who had raised a lot of money, a couple of them had to actually fold shop. They couldn't meet the obligations and the shut shop. So that, you could say in a way, yes, we all love a healthy competition and would like to have competition because that's what keep you on your toes, right? But at the same time, having one less makes it all the more better, right? So I think some of the bigger ones, the shut shop. So that was one. The second thing also, Reshmi, what happened is when we came out of the lockdown, now, because during the lockdown, we had, as I said, those two properties we had onboarded. So we managed to convince the owners and push the rental payouts almost till August or September. So we had absolutely no operating expenses as far as properties are concerned. So it was only the salaries of the 4 or 5 of us that were there in the team that time. So we could manage our OPEX very well. So when we came out of the lockdown, fortunately, we had that much better financial cushion. So a lot of mom and pop, operators also started coming to us and saying, "Hey, could you take up our lease obligations? We're unable to fulfill those obligations anymore." And that's one of the reasons why we had such a strong growth in the last 5 to 6 months. Right. So that is the second thing which happened, Reshmi. And the third one is the owners also realized that, hey, look, this might be a good model to work with. There is an assured revenues and stuff. So they started, the asset or the cost of taking up an asset started coming down slightly. Pre-pandemic, it was very inflated. People with large amount of funds, they used to overvalue the property. So the owners were used to a certain high valuation. But post-pandemic, I think that expectation also come down. So the cost for us to acquire a property has come down a little, and that has positively impacted the EBITDA margins, right? So I think if you look at this space, typically all us operators, we operate between 20 to 25 EBITDA margin. But because the cost of owning an asset has now come down or leasing an asset, the EBITDA margins might be slightly in the 30 to 35% range, right? So these are the things which happen from a competition perspective and from our own structure, Reshmi. Yes, there are certain basic hygiene now we are trying to incorporate. There are no more properties which have 3 rooms, 3 beds in a room. So we have changed all to 2 beds at the most. All the rooms will have your masks provided and your sanitizers. Then sanitizing the property once in a week, providing, avoiding gathering at community places or at the meals. So those kind of basic protocols we're trying to follow. When we look at some of the properties in Jaipur, especially, the government also has certain protocols that we are mandated to follow. So we are taking care of that. But yes, I don't, but on the hindsight, again, or rather not hindsight, Reshmi, what I feel now, you know, so if you look at the shared accommodation, right, you have the student accommodation side, and the other part you have the co-living or the executives, right? But my personal feeling is that the student accommodation is going to bounce back much faster, simply because the students, all of us have been through that phase. We don't want to stay at home when we are in the final year of engineering, right? We all want to be in hostels with our friends, right? So just day before yesterday, we started our operations in a 500-bed property in Noida. And you won't believe, I think in the first couple of days, we almost had 60-70% occupancy. All the kids returned. And one of the common things we heard from majority is that, hey, look, we could go to the movie theaters, we could go to the cafes, we could go to the parks, but we're not allowed in classrooms. And they said, one of the big reasons is because the teachers are now so used to teaching from home and having the warm food that they don't want to come back to college, right? So all the kids were there. So I think we believe that that segment is going to bounce back much faster. On the executive housing, I think we still, many of us are still prefer to work from home if possible. So co-living might take a hit, but student housing is coming back pretty strongly.
You were talking about like you're now focusing on the student community, right? So now the new concept has come about staycation. Even people are not preferring work from home; they are also planning to move out and work from some other peaceful location or somewhere else. So are you
Right.
planning to expand your offering to that section as well in the future?
Not at the time being, Rishmi, not at the time being, simply because we felt that maybe the DNA required to operate both these different segments is very different. We may not have that competency at this point in time. And also, if you look at the expectation from a student vis-a-vis expectation from a working professional, they're very different, right? I mean, for a student hostel, you can have the maybe a TV or and everything on a common area.
Mm-hmm.
But for a working professional, you need to have those in the rooms, right? And all rooms need to be AC. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not looking at that segment for the time being, but yeah, you never know. Yeah, maybe
Mm-hmm.
once we are more experienced in the student segment, we may branch out to the working professionals, and maybe at a certain point in time, we may bring back our whole concept of the elderly homes as well. Never know. So yeah, those are the cards that we have up our sleeves. It's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Actually, now we have come almost to the close of the interview, so I want to know two fun questions about you, which is
Sure.
like a favorite, yeah, which is like a favorite book, business book, or any book that you would love to recommend to other entrepreneurs.
Um, yeah, I don't read too many of this thing. I'm more driven by the political, or the economic affairs.
Okay.
But one book I would certainly recommend is by a lady called Sumita Mahajan. It's
Mhm.
Miles to Go Before I Sleep. I think that it's a wonderful story. So this lady, she was suffering from diabetes and then a homemaker, and she actually took a run with Milind Soman from Delhi to Mumbai against all odds and beating her asthma. I think that's a phenomenal endeavor. So I love that book. The other one I recently came across is the Bhujia Baron, a story about the growth of Haldirams. I think that's also provided phenomenal insight. And what I loved about it is that how the woman in the family, they've actually shaped the entire growth and the growth narrative of Haldiram. It's phenomenal. But I'm not too much into books, Reshmi, unfortunately. More into, you could ask me anything about the political and the economic situations, I would answer that much better.
No, actually, these books, sure, we all know the growth of Haldiram, so it might be a very insightful reading, of
It
course.
is wonderful.
And my next question, any project management tool, because TeamWave is a project management software, so you would be interested in know any project management tool that you prefer or you use regularly?
We're currently not using much. I think the more we grow, Reshmi, that's the point in time we'll look at. So those are the things my partner, Mr. Gaurav, and Dr. Rashmi, they take care of it. We did use some in All Is Health
Mm-hmm.
successfully, I think. But yeah, we might be looking at it in the next financial year, definitely. As we grow and have more people to coordinate and collaborate with, we should be looking at it.
Okay, great. And my final question is any advice for the entrepreneurs or people who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs, any advice for them?
Yeah, I think one thing that has shaped my career, Rishmi, and I say it in many several forums, is when I went to Babson. I think the first thing the professor said us and told us there is that make ambiguity your best friend. At that point in time, it was very tough for us to understand. But once 8 years, 9 years in the entrepreneurial journey, I think that words they were golden. When you get up as an entrepreneur, you don't know what's going to happen in the next hour, in the 2 hours, in the day, and situations are so ambiguous. Initially you try to fight it out and prepare your long-term plans, your short-term goals, but at the end of the day it's just taking decisions every hour by hour. So it's so ambiguous, right? So after a certain period, Reshmi, my advice would be don't fight ambiguity. Just make friends with it. It is going to be there, irrespective of your size and stage of the venture. It's better to make peace with it and live with it. It makes you better at taking decisions.
Yeah. Oh, I love that part actually because we are all scared of ambiguity, right? That's the
Absolutely.
worst part. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Chinmoy. That was all. Anything else that I missed out on that you want to share?
I know that's been wonderful chatting with you, Reshmi, and it's a
Yeah, same
wonderful
here.
initiative. So good luck to you and your team. All
Yeah,
right,
all the
and
best to you.
take
And
care and have a great day.
yeah, take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.